Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor and subscribe to the John Con Report wherever you get your podcasts. And you can catch us on YouTube at Ampire Media. That's AMPIRE. You get there, you hit the like button, you hit the subscribe button, and we'll keep rolling. But today, I'm joined by my good friend, Mike Jones from USA Today, as we discuss Carson Wentz, the third year of Ron Rivera's program with Washington, and how do the Commanders fit in the NFC East. Mike had a sit-down interview with Wentz for a story that will appear on USA Today about where he's at basically in his career. And I think you'll enjoy hearing Mike's insight into his meeting with Wentz and about where maybe there's some areas of growth and some things that are some positive signs just in that regard. And I also asked Mike about some of his observations about being here watching the Commanders practice on Wednesday. Before I get to that, I'm going to want to talk about the preseason game. And before I get to that, just a reminder, I will have a story up on ESPN.com about where the passing game is at right now. I say passing game, it's not just Carson Wentz, it's everybody. This is something that's an offensive team thing. So it's not just Wentz. Where are they at based on conversations with players and coaches? And I think they would all agree. In fact, they all say it's a work in progress. Folks, it's August 11th. It should be a work in progress because there's so many new parts that if it looked awesome every day right now, I'd honestly be very surprised. The key is, how do they look Saturday against the Panthers? How do they look the following week against the Chiefs? And then how do they look in that season opener against the Jaguars? Let's see steady progress. If they make that, then eventually they will be just fine and actually probably very good. So there you go. And like I said, before I get to my conversation with Mike, slow down. I want to go over some things for Saturday's preseason opener against the Panthers. Ron Rivera said that starters would play 15 to 20 snaps. That's good. I'm glad that they're going to play at least more than a series. I think one series makes it very tough to really see anything for the coaches. I think to play a couple series is a good thing for the starters. That gives Carson Wentz a chance to work on some of that timing. Let's see. What I'm curious to see is, how does he handle if there's a breakdown in the play, the pressure? How does he handle that with the footwork, with the mechanics, et cetera? How is the timing with he and the receivers and the offensive line? Are they giving him protection? All that stuff defensively. And I think that all that's important to see. It's not a final judgment. It's another step in the process, and that is it. With the defense, I'm curious to see, where's Jamin Davis at? How is he looking? Is he reacting suddenly or more suddenly in the run game? We know that he can cover pretty well, but how is he reacting there? How does he react in zone coverage versus man? Things like that. How does that defensive backfield hold up? They look solid throughout camp. Does that continue into the game? One other thing to think about too is, or to know, they're obviously not game planning for this. So sometimes you may see certain coverages and certain plays that wouldn't necessarily run against that defensive look, or maybe they'd run a different defense against that style of offense just because you have more game planning. So it's why you don't overreact to preseason games. It's more about measuring individual progressions to me. Anyway, so the other thing to watch for is situational work. Do they get a lot of third downs? Can you work on situations? That's a key one, obviously. The red zone as well. How much red zone work can they get? I mean, one thing Rivera said he'd like to see is rookie Sam Howell get some 2-minute situations. They were working a little bit that in practice on Thursday with him, just some hurry up stuff or 2-minute situation stuff. They'd really like to see that for him. Taylor Heineke will obviously play after Wentz, and then he'll probably play into the third quarter, and then Howell will take over. A couple other notes on this. Curtis Samuel will play. That's good. I think Samuel's actually looked good when he's practiced. It's just that they've been, again, taking him out, part of the plan. He says he's going to play in the season opener based on where he's at right now. And I don't think there's any doubt in his mind about that. But again, I can tell you, he looks better than he did last year. Even when he played against Atlanta, when he came back last year, he did not look like the Curtis Samuel that we saw in Carolina. He does look pretty good this summer in that regard. Would be a huge help if that continues. Some guys who won't play: tight end John Bates, tight end Cole Turner, center Chase Roullier, not going to play. Among the rookies, I want to see, I'm curious what they do. Without Cole Turner and John Bates, you're going to get a lot of Curtis Hodges and Amani Rodgers at tight end. I think it'll be fun to watch. What do they do? How is their blocking? Watch their feet when they're blocking. How are they moving there? How is their strength holding up? Because it's a new spot for Rodgers. And I think Hodges has to get used to that as well, blocking in the NFL, in addition to watching them run because they both run very well. Rodgers really runs well, and they're both very fluid. Chris Paul at guard, I think he's at a nice camp. What does he do? Percy Butler as a safety, what does he do? I think he's behind Derek Force. Force is at a solid camp. How does Force do? We didn't see a lot of him last year, especially in the summer, because he was hurt. So where he's looked good during training camp, does that continue? And then finally, I think I'd like to see Brian Robinson, the running back from Alabama. One thing about him, he's not a Derrick Henry type. Even though we talk about him being between the tackles runner, he's not Derrick Henry. He doesn't have that same kind of a build. Where he really excels, he will lower his shoulder, but where he really excels to me is his ability to set up blockers. Watch the patience he runs with and how he sets that up and uses that to his advantage, which then makes him effective between the tackles. And then the return game, see how Dax Milne handles that. They'll have a few guys back there, but Milne will be a guy to watch for kicks and punts because that's how he can win a job as that sixth receiver. So there you go. That's it for me. I wanted to keep it short because I want to get to my conversation with my friend Mike Jones from USA Today. So let's go. Well, Mike, it was great seeing you out of practice on Wednesday, I guess it was. I kind of lose track of the days here. You've been able to go to a few different camps. I know you talked to Carson Wentz. So I just wanted to get your impressions. First of all, I know they didn't have a full padded practice. So when you go out there, what kind of things did you see and what were you looking for?
When you helicopter in one day, I don't make any sharp, snap reactions or anything like that. I just try to see how things are flowing, see if it looks like there's chemistry, see if there's anybody who kind of jumps out and catches your eye a little bit. Obviously I wanted to see what Wentz's accuracy looked like, and things like that. Again, when it comes to tackling,
Right.
the run game, defense, it's hard to tell. But as far as just flow, and does this guy look comfortable? Does this guy look like he's overmatched here or there? Those are things you can kind of see, if they're up to the pace, or if somebody's standing out. So that's just kind of what I tried to see is, how Wentz interacted in that offense, how Dotson looked as a rookie, if there anybody who kind of flashed, that type of stuff.
We'll get to Wentz in a few minutes. What did you think of Dotson?
I thought that he does look very smooth. We were talking as we were standing down there, and how he runs his routes. And then I talked to Scott Turner afterwards about him, and he just said, man, this kid is just the way he goes after the ball, the way he just has a great feel for the secondary and the coverages. It stands out. I was a little surprised. He looked a little smaller than what I was expecting. I mean, I'd seen his measurements, but then when you see him out there, you're like, man, this guy's kind of little. But he does, make some tough catches. He does move really well. And so I'm really curious to see what he looks like when they're out there in a game, when they're in pads, and things are really, flying fast and furious.
People say that about me too, Mike. They say out there and say, man, he's really little. So, but it is funny with Dotson.
But you always flash though. So
well, I'm not sure that's always a good thing, but he also he does play bigger. And that's one of the things that always jumped out to me when you watch him play on film in college or whatever. And then you see him out there, he's smaller, but he doesn't play small. So what other things when Scott talked about coverage and all that and reading it, what other things did he touch on with you that kind of maybe gave an indication of where they feel he's at and what he could do this year?
Really was high on his maturity level and just his approach to the game. Now, he said, he's not a veteran in his experience to some of those guys, but he is still, they feel like, ahead of where a lot of rookies will be. They feel like they've got a really potent trio with Dotson and McLaurin and Samuel, that they can really use the whole field, that they can stretch the field, they can use intermediate, they can use the middle, that there's really nothing that they can't do now. And also that plays in with Wentz's arm. They now have a big armed quarterback who can get the ball downfield. It's just a matter of him, figuring out the timing of each one of those receivers,
Right.
because as Ron Rivera said, all three of those guys are fast, but they all have a different kind of fast. So just that, but they do feel like that Dotson just steps right in. And, in talking to other people around the league, before heading into training camp, I was asked a bunch of scouts, different teams, hey, who are some young guys you think that you're going to break out this year? Maybe second year guys. And, one guy said, well, two different guys mentioned Dotson, and they said, I know he's not a second year guy, but this kid's going to go out there and he's really going to pop onto the scene just because of the way that he executes, the way that he has a knack for making plays. So there's buzz about him around the league, even though they haven't even played their first preseason game.
And the other thing, it's funny because when you're out there doing daily reports, you're measuring each day.
Mhm.
And, you're able to come in and see a bigger picture view. So where do you feel like they think everything is at this point? Because again, I look at the past game, it's a work in progress. And I keep
Right.
saying it's a measure how it looks this week, then how does it look next week, et cetera, et cetera. Is it developing? Where do you feel like they think things are at right now?
They feel like things are progressing very well. And again, I don't put a whole lot of judgment myself because I haven't seen where
Right,
they've been. But like you could probably look at things and see where it was at one point and where it is
right.
now. And talking to Ron Rivera and Scott Turner, they both and Wentz, they both felt like there's definite progress. You see Wentz moving in and out of the huddle faster, making more adjustments at the line, executing, pulling the trigger more quickly. And so they feel like their pass game, like you said, work in progress. Even Rivera said, I still think he's working to get used to his teammates,
Yeah.
but they do see a lot of positives that let them know, okay, the aggression is starting to ramp up here.
They're right. And that stuff doesn't happen overnight. And
No.
overnight still is August. We're on type doing this on August 11th. By this point, it would be remarkable if they were operating at peak efficiency. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? And so how did you compare? Like when you were here at this camp and you've been to what, San Francisco, and what were the other camps you've been to?
Baltimore, San Francisco, and Cincinnati.
Okay.
And Cincinnati was kind of hard because Joe Burrow wasn't practicing. So it's Brandon Allen. So the
So,
offense theirs was struggling.
but when you're going there and you're seeing those are three obviously good teams. How would you compare what and again, I know it's hard for one day because you really want to get a feel,
Mhm.
and it was not a full padded practice, but when you look at tempo, energy, and things like that, how do those four camps compare?
I felt like the tempo in San Francisco was probably faster than any of Washington, Baltimore, or Cincinnati. Again, Cincinnati didn't have their top quarterback out there. San Francisco, the tempo all across the board was a little bit faster, even though Trey Lance is still learning here. I would have liked to have seen yesterday for Washington if they had been in pads, because
Right.
that also gives guys a little bit
Gives
more
it better.
juice. You
Absolutely.
know, and the defense is running the scout team and everything, so you're
Right.
not going to play quite as fast. But, Baltimore, they were on day 1 and 2 of camp that I saw them. So they were still kind of easing and ramping it up and things like that. So you're seeing them at different points in their process. Although San Francisco, they were on day 4 and 5 when I was there, but they had pads on. There was a more of a crispness, just the way that everybody moved around in between, on the field and in between stations.
So was there anything else that jumped out at you again in the little snippet you were able to catch yesterday?
Um, Not really. Again, with the defensive guys, they're not really, really hitting, going
Right.
after the quarterbacks and stuff like that. The versatility, I think, of the running backs, the just different sizes. They have like running backs that are all different shapes and sizes was interesting. The offensive line, I'm still like looking and okay, who are these guys? There's not really any names on that offensive line, but it does look like there's good depth there.
Mhm.
I don't, sometimes you can look and you see the first team come in and then you see the second team come in and there's a clear drop off. It didn't seem like there was much of a drop off between that. I thought that Wentz made some good throws. There was a couple other ones that weren't, but he didn't look as, somebody had told me that he'd been, kind of erratic. And I, just reading reports, but he looked pretty crisp yesterday, from what I could tell. He connected deep on a couple ones. He overthrew, one or two here and there, but just again for one day, I think that they looked solid. And I'm really interested in seeing what they look like in that game. And
Right.
again, I know the starters are going to play a whole lot, maybe not, but really seeing what it looked like, and how does it translate to game type of tempo.
And you're right about Wentz. And the thing that I always tell people, again, process, where are they at
Mhm.
today? And it's not all, an incompletion can be on how getting used to the receiver's depth, getting used to the timing
Yes,
of them coming out of the break. Maybe there's pressure in the pot, maybe there's too much pressure where you're throwing with a
right,
different base. There's all sorts of things that go into it. And it's not just as simple as, oh, Wentz made a bad throw. He's terrible. I don't
right.
subscribe to that because he's got a track record in this league and you can measure that. So, but
Mhm.
what you said, you had a chance to sit down and talk to him. What did you think of your conversation with him and just him in general?
I felt I didn't know what to expect, how he was going to be, but he does seem like he's very comfortable. And the way he talked about being intentional about building relationships with his teammates, I thought was interesting because one of the knocks on him had been that he's a little bit aloof from teammates and everything. But I also think that, in talking to some people, that maybe that had more to do with where he was in his life and
Right.
where some of his teammates, if you're, in a different place, and so it's hard to connect. But here in this locker room, he's married, he's got some kids. There's a lot of family guys in this locker room. He's, very religious. There's religious guys in this locker room. It sounded to me like he is connecting well. And he said, even though sometimes, we might not be at the same place, there's still stuff we can do, whether they go out to eat or, go fishing or hunting or something like that. He was looking for ways to come in here and connect, and he recognized this is a young locker room and they need leadership, and it's kind of hard to lead when you're still, learning everybody. But his goal is to go in there, establish relationships, build chemistry, and he feels good about where things are in that process, as he gets to know his teammates. And he was very encouraged. The thing that stood out to me is that you can tell he feels accepted. Now he says that, at this point in his career, it doesn't really matter as much, but he said it's been clear, Ron, Scott, they wanted him and they want him to be him. He doesn't have to try to be something that he's not, doesn't have to try to be the savior. Now, he wants to be a leader and he's very competitive and wants to win. But he feels very good about where he is in this process and what he's got around him, and the collective expectations of this team, and where they're all on the same page.
And it's funny because that always matters, no matter what career you're in or profession you're in. Knowing that somebody wants you there does
Mhm.
matter, right?
Right, right. Yeah, exactly. And I think that in Philly, obviously, after the knee injury and the Super Bowl, he was constantly looking over his shoulder. Then when he got to Indianapolis, he knew Frank Reich wanted him, but it was very clear that not everybody was on the same page. And then, the way it ended, I mean, in Indianapolis, Jim Irsay was telling anybody that, would, cross his path, that, they wanted to get rid of him. But here he's at a place where they went and got him. They, talked about what they liked about him and how he could help them. It's, and he just feels like, yeah, these guys want me. I'm not here because some do, and you don't have to worry about some don't. Everybody's on the same page, and that helps him be able to acclimate and really just take this thing, by the horns.
And it's funny you bring up the relationship part because I'm sure you heard a lot of the same stuff where it's like he's not a bad guy, and I don't think he was
Right.
ever a bad guy. I think it was more he's a very type A guy who had to learn, and even people close to him would say he doesn't have that bubbly personality, which not everybody does.
Right.
But he had to, that he had to learn how to do that. So you feel like he's learning how to develop more of those within the framework of who he is.
Yeah, and I think that, like he had mentioned, maybe we don't, this is not the same here, and here in our lives, but there is always a common ground you can find. So
Right.
I think that maybe before, sometimes maybe not wanting to offend people or not wanting to bristle, he just removed himself from certain situations or keep to himself or whatever. But I think that here he's like, okay, he's learning that there are different ways to build relationships. They're different. Everybody's got a different way to connect with them, even though, maybe you're into this thing and I'm into this thing, but okay, we do both like this. And so I think learning where people come from is something that he said that is very interesting to him, life backgrounds and things like that. And so you can tell that I think that, look, he was a 20-something-year-old kid in a locker room where
Right.
there's a lot of veterans. Now he's, almost 30 and there's a lot of young guys. So you can tell the maturity is there, and understanding that, okay, I might have to switch up my methods when it comes to building relationships and leading a team.
Guys do mature and develop in a lot of
Right.
different ways throughout their career. I mean, it's funny because like we watched D'Angelo Hall. He came in
Yeah.
with the Angelo reputation, and by the end, he was a guy that people considered a leader.
Right.
And I think that's what shocked a lot of people who had played with him or coached him prior to that. So guys do mature and develop. How do you feel like this team right now? And again, it's very hard because we haven't even seen him in a game. But how
Mhm.
do you feel did you feel going into camp and at this point that this team stacks up in the NFC East?
There are questions about every single team in this
Sure.
division. And coming into the division, I thought Dallas had the least amount of questions. They do have the most consistent quarterback, but they're having some injury issues here and there. I don't know that they really got better this offseason. But I will still say that, okay, we'll put them, first in that division. But I think that it's wide open after that. I don't expect a whole lot out of the Giants. I'm very curious what we're going to see from Jalen Hurts and the Eagles. But I think that Washington, they have a solid team. They've got a lot of weapons on offense. They've got a solid defense. Obviously, with everything they've got invested in that defense, you would like it to be more than solid. But there are questions still on how they can execute and everything like that. So I think Washington has a chance. And looking at them and talking to people around the league, I think that anywhere in that 8 to 10 games is really realistic for them as far as a win total there. You never know how things break. And you could very well see them be 10-7, or
Right.
you could see them 9-8, at the same time, you could see them, 8-9. But I think that they're going to be in the thick of things, certainly in this division.
How big a year is this, do you feel, for Ron Rivera?
I think it's very big. I mean, look, he's been here for a little while now. They finally have gotten the quarterback that they think that they need. They've been building this. They talked about building the whole roster, and then getting that quarterback in place. Well, here's where you've really got to, do it. They overachieved, a couple of years ago, and it surprised everybody by making the playoffs, even though they didn't have a winning season. But they still exceeded expectations there. Then, kind of come back to reality. Now is where you really need to take a step forward here, and get that future really trending in the right way, and then also lock up your long-term situation if you are Ron Rivera.
Mike, you got it. First of all, before we go, any grilling or smoking coming up?
Yes. I have some family coming down from Connecticut. My wife does on
I smell wings and pulled pork.
Sunday. Well, my mother-in-law said, "Hey, can you do pulled pork?" Because I've done it several times. Anytime she has a thing. Now, one of them or the family members doesn't eat pork, so I think I'm gonna get some chickens and do
All
pulled chicken.
right.
So that way, I thought about maybe just doing pork and wings, and then I was like, you know what, maybe I'll just throw, because time is a little bit, it's kind of
Sure.
hard to get that time to smoke a pork butt for 14 hours. So I think I'm gonna go with the chickens. I'll probably get 3 or 4 chickens, throw them on the smoker with some apple wood, and I'm gonna brine them tonight, throw them on the smoker probably either tomorrow or
Well,
maybe
how long are you
maybe
brining them?
Saturday. I'll brine them for 24 hours is
All
what
right.
I'll do. So now I'm hoping I can do it tomorrow evening. But it might wind up being Saturday night after I get back from the game. It just depends on how everything flows, how much I get done on this Carson Wentz story today, as well. So if I'm still writing tomorrow, it might be kind of tricky, but hopefully I get Wentz knocked out today. Tomorrow is more
Here's your
freed up and I
incentive.
can do it in the evening.
So
Yeah.
when can people check out the Wentz story on usatoday.com?
Hopefully I'm filing that thing this afternoon on Thursday, and it'll be up on Friday
All right.
or Saturday morning.
There you go. And I look forward also to you shipping out some of that pulled chicken because, I know that's what you'll do. But at least send me a text. I always like the text. That's my favorite
Yeah.
thing. But people are like, Mike and I will do this. You're going to text. And I forgot. I will say, I did tell you, I think, because I did the chicken wings the other day on the grill, finished them
Yes.
in the air fryer. And the best thing is my wife takes a bite like, these might be the best chicken wings you've ever done. And they had this
I'm
nice
just
crisp.
I didn't get a picture though, like
I know,
it's
I know,
almost
I
like we
know,
can almost the
I
scratch
know,
and sniff just
I
about,
know.
you
And
know, you know.
oh, and I should have, because I did one with the Southern rub, one with garlic parmesan, and the Southern rub ones looked. I mean, they both were very good, but the Southern rub looked you could see the crisp, and I'm that's my apologies. I
Yeah.
was, I
I
was
did
right.
grill I did grill some London broil on
Okay,
was that
good.
Tuesday? That's great though, because it's like 15 minutes,
Yeah,
just flipping every minute or whatever. But then I'll do the chicken for the smoker.
there you go. Mike, thanks a lot for coming on. You're the best. Appreciate it. Look forward to seeing
All
you
right,
soon.
man. See you Saturday.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Mike for joining me, and thank you, as always, for listening. I'll be back with the wrap-up of Saturday's preseason opener against Carolina on Saturday with Bram Weinstein, the voice of the Washington Commanders. I'll talk to you next time.